Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience while we ironed out a few technical difficulties. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Christina Liaghati. She will be presenting on the MITRE Atlas, which is a growing community and a platform to support secure AI. So would you help me welcome Christina to the stage?
Thanks, Mike. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. I am from MITRE, which is a not-for-profit that works across the community of industry, academia, and government to especially collaborate on tools like Atlas. So Atlas is an AI security framework that I'm going to be diving into a little bit more detail over the next 15 minutes. Before I dive into a little bit more of what Atlas actually looks like here, I'll start with the overarching concept of AI assurance to help frame some of the challenge space that we've been collaborating across the community to really start to make an impact against over the last 5 years. And to kind of start framing that, AI security, which is really where Atlas lives, is part of this overarching challenge area of AI assurance. And that includes all of these different elements. And these elements themselves are even evolving pretty quickly as the community is seeing more and more types of vulnerabilities evolve as we're deploying AI-enabled systems in a much more rapid and innovative set of ways, right? So even these spaces are evolving pretty rapidly, but what I'm going to be primarily focusing on for the next 15 minutes is the AI security space, which is that highlighted yellow pillar. To touch on one other really big intersection when we start talking about AI security is the intersection of AI with cyber, right? A lot of the different spaces here, even for how these vulnerabilities are evolving, is coming from the more traditional cybersecurity world, right? And the AI security and assurance component that I'm going to be diving into is really focusing in on those vulnerabilities that are coming from how we're incorporating and deploying AI-enabled systems in the wild, right? Not the application of AI to cyber offense or defense, right? Like this isn't necessarily about misusing AI or using AI to apply that to the different types of traditional cyber worlds, but really more focused on these new vulnerabilities that come from how we're incorporating and deploying AI-enabled systems. When we started building out Atlas about 5 years ago, we built this out and kind of growing out of the same existing understanding from the cyber community of the tactics and techniques that adversaries would chain together to take advantage of traditional cyber systems. Because as you would imagine, the AI security problem, as it's evolving, it's frequently something that the cybersecurity community is having to evolve to deal with directly. So in trying to build tools that would be most easily adaptable, most familiar to the community, we wanted to build out of things that were already working well in the traditional cyber world. So we designed Atlas to look and feel and directly build off of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is an open source framework that we've built out with the cyber community over the last 10 years or so. So Atlas, about 5 years ago when we first started that, was to try and ground and build out of the things that the community was already familiar with. So if you've seen ATT&CK before, it looks very similar to Atlas, and we actually even reuse some of the attack tactics and techniques because, as you would imagine, these AI-enabled systems are never, they're not floating in the air. They're always part of a larger digital system that has some existing cyber vulnerabilities as well. So a lot of these attack chains that we've seen adversaries put together actually take advantage of both traditional cyber techniques and these new techniques from the application of AI-enabled systems inside of your new system of systems complex. To help really underpin what I mean by those tactics and techniques and help you really feel a little bit more of what we mean by these AI security vulnerabilities, all of those tactics and techniques in the website and in these different tools and databases are underpinned by these case studies. And these are real world attacks that have been demonstrated to work well in the real world environment, right? We're trying to scope down from the thousands of papers that are being published across the adversarial machine learning community or the hype headlines, right? We're trying to really help the community scope down from all of that to, hey, here are the things that have been demonstrated to work well in the real world and could be impacting your system in the wild today. And we've been doing that by using these case studies, as small of a set as possible, to really demonstrate those unique attack pathways. And in this particular example, these were just two individuals that bought some headshots of Chinese citizens off of the black market, and they modified those into a very crude set of videos, not even something as sophisticated as the deepfake videos that you see today. But those were just headshots, slightly blinking their eyes, mouth opening and closing, head slightly turning. Anything that a human would immediately recognize was not a person. But the facial recognition system that the Shanghai Tax Authority was using to verify citizens before giving them access to their network hadn't been trained to deal with cases like that and was authenticating them, and allowed these users, these two individuals, to create multiple profiles and submit fraudulent invoices repeatedly over a 2.5-year period to steal $77 million from the Shanghai Tax Authority. So these kinds of attacks are happening in the wild. In cases like this, we've given an example where this was an actual malicious actor in the wild. I'll jump over to the website in just a second to show you a little bit more of the look and feel of what it looks like when we're including even white hat hacker exercises as well. So this is the public-facing website, right? We've built this out with well over 100 organizations involved in the broader community now. So this is a group of academia, government, and industry that are all fairly mature on this topic space to help inform the rest of the community and really build everybody up to a minimum baseline level of awareness of how to understand and deal with some of these threats. On the front-facing website, while I've got this here, I'll also point out a few other resources like the AI Security 101 page, right? If you're just coming into understanding this topic, I'd highly recommend that you at least start there. We've got all of the data behind the website, behind all of the tools and techniques that we have underneath the matrix itself, because it's not just the public-facing framework anymore. All of that is on our GitHub page. We open source everything to the community as much as humanly possible here. And then we break down all of these tactics and techniques in these different pages here on the matrix. So I'll jump into another case study here. And again, I was mentioning all these case studies really underpin all of those attacks in the matrix, those tactics and techniques. We just talked through the camera hijack attack, and I'll briefly speak to another one here that's actually a much more recent LLM-based attack that was demonstrated when a few individuals, these were white hat hackers, so not malicious actors, were deliberately demonstrating how you could download a model from a public website. And in this case, they downloaded that from Hugging Face, a very popular public repository of attacks that are happening, or of models that are being used in the wild. These models can be downloaded, and in this case, they modified just a few of the weights in the model, right? Just a few tiny tweaks to where the performance of the poisoned model and the original model were not really measurably different from each other, so you really couldn't tell that this attack had been implemented. And those poisoning modifications to change a few of those weights was enough to start to deliver false facts when the model was being used related to a certain subset of topics. You can imagine how dangerous this could be and how folks might be using these models to, say, detect new types of cyber attacks, right? Like if it's been poisoned to miss an entire class of malware, or it's been designed to deliver misinformation or disinformation around a certain type of topic or individual, right? You could be deliberately poisoning these models, and then, like in this case, they re-uploaded that model after they verified it. They re-uploaded it to the public-facing website and exposed it back out to the community, but no one could measure or detect that this had been done to that model, right? So this is really underpinning that any public sources of models or data sets that we're getting from the wild, we need to kind of use those with a grain of salt at this point and understand that somebody could have poisoned or manipulated those models to achieve a certain end goal without us really being able to necessarily measure or detect that they had deliberately designed the model or poisoned a model to deliver those kinds of false information, that kind of poisoned data back out of it, right? So this is another example why we actually deliberately include the white hat hacker exercises in the Atlas matrix as well, because if it had not been a white hat hacker that reported this back out to the community, we wouldn't know that this kind of an attack couldn't or had been executed in the wild, right? Because we couldn't have detected a actual malicious actor doing this if they of course hadn't reported it to us. So that's a lens on just the case studies behind this. The one other thing that I'll briefly jump into as well, we started open sourcing this mitigations page on the Atlas website about a year ago as well, because you would imagine that much of the community around this, as they started to get a better handle on, okay, this is what these attacks look like. Now I'm knowing that I'm vulnerable. What do I do about that? And we started aligning these mitigations to the tactics and techniques in the website as well. So folks started to get a little bit more of a feel for what they could do to mitigate some of these different attack patterns too. Land on the final contact us page so you can see a little bit more of the ways that you can get engaged in the community, including the Slack space. and a lot of the collaborative community environment that we have around this. Like I said, we've got well over 100 different organizations involved in all of this. And I'll briefly speak to one of the bigger community collaborations that we're kicking off next week in Paris around the NATO community that is deliberately trying to kind of build this awareness and understanding of these threats and mitigations and build a little bit more of a NATO community set of baseline capabilities to deal with it as well. I've chaired an exploratory team across the NATO community focused on this topic for the last year, and last fall they voted to mature that into a research task group. So in the bottom left-hand corner here, you'll see our 4 lines of efforts that we're executing with our broader community of NATO bodies and members and enhanced opportunity partners, which includes folks like Australia, where we're going to be bringing a lot more of the community together to actually build some baseline capabilities for the NATO community groups to deal with some of these threats too. The last topic that I will close on is the incident sharing mechanisms that we've been building out with the broader community for the last year and a half, 2 years, because you would imagine that much of the data on how these attacks are actually happening in the wild are really organized into these different organizational silos. And that's a pretty big limitation for the community to actually do data-driven risk analysis here, right? Being able to do statistics-driven analysis is actually quite challenging for the community if you don't have access to data outside of your own organization. So we've been building these mechanisms, right? Beyond just the website itself, we've been building a kind of protected, anonymized sharing information environment where we can take advantage of kind of MITRE's role as that not-for-profit third-party space in the middle to capture folks' data, appropriately anonymize it, and then push it back out to the entire community, right? And then us kind of playing in that sweet spot between industry and government is allowing us to bring the community together to be able to actually do that, right? So this has been our biggest focus for the last year and a half, and we're really excited to keep building this out with the community and arming folks with more of this kind of data-driven information. The last thing I'll leave up here is contact information. The email address there on the top comes straight into me and my team's inbox. So I would love to get more of you engaged and involved as we're continuing to build this out as a set of collaborative tools for the community. And hopefully more of us will continue to build that baseline across our awareness and understanding of what these risks look like, and actually use some of these capabilities to actually mitigate the threats that are continuing to rise in levels of sophistication across the community groups.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'll see if there's any questions.
That's that.
Cool. All right. Well, I will be right over here. Please come by and say hi. It was great to talk to you all.